You're listening to the Crypto Unchained podcast, powered by SwissBorg.
Welcome and thank you everybody for joining us for Crypto Unchained. Today I'm joined by Shamus Rae, who is partner and head of digital disruption at KPMG UK. Shamus has over 2 decades of experience leading major digital transformation projects, AI and automation for some of the world's most famous corporations. And thankfully he's here today to have a discussion on many topics from innovation, digital labor and even cognitive transformation. Thank you very much, Shamus.
It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your career, how you've gotten to this point, Shamus, because people might not think of KPMG as traditionally a cutting-edge digital business, but of course some of the work that you're involved in is exactly that. Explain to the audience what you do and how, again, you've gotten to this point.
Well, it's probably worth saying that I am a techie from a long time ago and actually did computing science as a degree. And right from the start, I worked for small organizations doing quite disruptive things. So in fact, in the 80s, I was working on workflow, relationship databases, and graphical interfaces before Windows came out, right? So I was enjoying myself kind of doing some quite advanced techie stuff. And I've always been slightly rebellious as well. And then I found myself in India building IT and outsourcing companies as a serial entrepreneur. And built lots of IT companies out there and very proud of that experience, and then arrived back in the UK, became part of PwC and then via IBM into KPMG, and I can bring that technology and disruptive thinking piece into the organisation, and sure. We're a large advisory organisation, 60,000 advisors around the world, 200,000 people overall. And now I look after, as you say, I do a lot of digital transformation, both of the firm itself, so kind of looking at audit and tax, etc., but also working with clients out of the marketplace. And I have a lot of fun doing that and have a great team behind me. So,
what are some of the topics that you are discussing most or getting the most interest from corporations at the moment? Because I know a big part of your role is to speak at public events and also appear on panels. What is the buzzwords or the topics that corporations are really interested in at the moment around digital transformation and AI and the other topics that you deal with?
Yeah, so I think actually, to be fair, people talk about digital transformation in a very generic way, but they get straight into AI and blockchain, if that makes sense. And I think what they want to understand in AI initially is what's real and what's not real, because obviously there's lots of hype, right? And there are lots of people overselling what they've done or what they've got, but they also start to think what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. There's too much tendency is going to go out to 2045, and we have the conversation about the singularity, which is an interesting conversation and is a great intellectual chat, but actually it's not relevant to what business has got to do in the next 5 to 10 years. So actually what they want to know is what's real, what's not real, and then they need to go through a stage of playing with technology, because they have no idea, to be honest. And once they play with it sufficiently, they then start thinking about it strategically. And that's the most difficult thing for them to do, because they kind of, it's easy to play, more difficult to kind of go, actually strategically, how's this going to change the business model going forward? So that's the big issue, I think.
So again, talking about what's real and what's not, distributed ledger technology is touted as the most disruptive development the world has seen in the past couple of decades. Is that true in your opinion?
So actually, I think artificial intelligence is slightly more disruptive than the distributed ledger, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
The problem that the distributed ledger piece has at the moment is there are a whole load of use cases that people have built which don't need a distributed ledger. They've almost just put it in there as a matter of course, because it's easy to raise money. So I won't give examples because that'd be unfair on the companies which are doing it. But we're looking at a model at the moment, and it's kind of to open up professional services, right?
Sure.
And part of it's about building a common data model for professional services, and then creating an open API so that people can start building and seeing technology off that common data model into the open API. Then obviously we'll do a marketplace, clearly, but that's nothing special. And then above that, we're talking about creating a distributed trust layer, which is going to be based on blockchain. And we'll have 2 or 3 different blockchains, which will look at, first it will look at the due diligence of all the suppliers in the marketplace. Because actually, if a large organisation wants to use your organisation, or in fact even mine, then they'll have to go through a whole kind of anti-bribery, anti-slavery, anti-corruption due diligence. So that gets done once, gets put in the blockchain, and people can go and pick up that record and go, is this supplier a good supplier? Another blockchain will look at all the previous results and hold those results just in case they need to go back and audited or checked by a third party. And then finally, the final blockchain will look at the results and the data given to the service provider and go, actually, what was the outcome? What was the quantifiable and qualifiable view of that service delivery? And by having those 3 blockchains, we've got a distributed trust layer which can work. And I think that's a great example of using blockchain in the right way. And that's we've designed that, and we're now looking to build that over the next 18 months.
It's a really interesting point, because trust seems to be one of the elements that always comes up when talking about blockchain and reasons why it can work or potentially be applied to any business or some models in general. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. What do you think are some of the biggest problems blockchain adoption for corporations they face? People talk about the regulatory side of it, the cost, whether it's just a bit of a vanity project. What other big problems you think there might be with adoption or hurdles that need to get over?
So I think this comes back to having use cases which are genuine blockchain use cases, and actually it becomes a much easier thing to do. So I think if you look at the inland revenue equivalent in Spain, and they're demanding that if you can't just claim back your VAT if you're kind of passing something a service through B2B, business to business, without actually showing that somebody's paying VAT at the end, right? So you've got to be able to follow that money all the way through. And so there's a classic blockchain case there, right? So of course it's going to exist in that scenario. It's going to exist in my distributed trust scenario, and it's easy. I would say regulators, both in AI and blockchain, the concept of regulators has been used as an excuse not to move quickly. Now, regulators need to catch up, but I sit on the committee for the AI all-party parliamentary group, and we often talk about regulation in terms of AI, right? And in reality, everybody's up for discussing changes in regulation to increase innovation and the entrepreneur spirit in the UK, and it'll be the same in other countries. So there's an openness for discussion, and the regulation piece, I think, is used as an excuse by people who want to slow things down. But sorry, so I do kind of go, it's clear that the big banks are using blockchain for payments, etc. And that makes complete sense, and it's going to be a huge success there, right? But again, that's a classic. There's a genuine need, a proper use case, etc. But there are other use cases you could come up with. I mean, there's some interesting blockchain work going on in the oil and gas world, right? And you start having oil being kind of drilled out of the ground, put into a tanker, and by the time it comes off, it could have changed hands 15 or 20 times. So having a blockchain to try and manage all of that makes a lot of sense. But it's got to be a genuine use case, I think, is the answer. Long answer to a short question, apologies.
And arguably that's what most people are saying, pretty much. Find genuine use cases where they can add real value to the real world. Tell me a little bit about digital labour in the economy and what work you do with that, because I've got an interesting question for you, but first I want you to define it for the audience.
Yeah, so digital labour, it's a kind of broad definition, and it goes from doing what people call robotic process automation. It's a very old-fashioned technology, in my opinion. Obviously, there are certain companies will be upset about me saying that, but it's kind of macro in screen scraping type stuff, which, to be honest, I wrote my first one in the late 1980s, right? So all the way through to artificial intelligence, and it's about, can we augment or replace tasks and work, and that will impact the types of jobs that people have, etc. So intelligent automation covers all of that, if that makes sense.
Is there a way for tokenization to play a role in the new digital economy? So using the example of digital labor, if we're able to take away some of these tasks and automate them and take it away from the traditional ways of doing work and processing, if we tokenize parts of the labor market or the labor force, could they work hand in hand, do you think?
Yeah, so I think there are lots of opportunities for tokens in a digitized professional services world. I mean, just using that as one sector. As we automate in services and we start using different types of organizations and groups of people, I envisage a world only a few years away where organizations will go, I need a project team to do X, and the skills that I need to do X are going to be some internal, some external. I might actually have an AI system acting as a team member, and I may have an AI system augmenting other team members. But actually there'll be internal and external. And actually there's an opportunity for me to pay for IP rather than just by labour hours. And then I can go, okay, well, if I've got that IP now from Vince, how do I, every time I use it, pay Vince for the fact that I've taken his IP? So that's one example. And there's there are a couple of interesting organisations working on exactly that at the moment. So I think it's a great opportunity.
And staying on the topic of AI, the narrative, generally speaking, is that public perception is a bit of a dystopian Terminator scenario when, as you mentioned, a singularity and humans are replaced, and there's this big all-out war between humanity and humanity's survival against, robots and machinery. But, I like to think of it, or my vision personally, is a little bit like Interstellar. And you remember Cooper's Station. So this is when Murphy, conquered gravity at the end of the movie, and you saw this utopian society where humanity and technology were working hand in hand. How do we, put those visions in people's head and stop people worrying whenever you see a Boston Dynamics video of a robot doing a backflip? People think, right, we've had it. How do we change that mentality?
Well, we need to change the tone of the conversation. That's really clear. But at the same time, so I do want to change it to a utopian conversation. But also, I do think we need to have a proper conversation about ethics, values, the future of work. How the Gini coefficient, which is the distribution of income between the 1% and the 99%, is dealt with, right? And we're not having those proactive conversations. We're having conversations which are dystopian 15, 20 years away. So even though I want to move the conversation away from dystopia, I still think there's some big conversations which we need to have now, which will stop us from going there, if that makes sense. So I don't want to hide from it. I do think that if, as a country, or as a series of governments, as a series of industries, and large companies, small companies, unless we engage with the public and start changing the tone of conversation proactively, we won't achieve anything. And then secondly, government and big organisations need to proactively manage towards a utopia, right? If we don't manage towards utopia because we're just talking about dystopia, we're going to get what we deserve, right? I wrote a paper the other day, and I, without sounding too high and mighty, I don't really believe in the concept of country, but I did write a paper about how the UK can win the AI race. And we looked at trust, and we looked at data and skills and capabilities in the UK. And actually, we did a poll of 2,000 people, and the reality is, of that group of people, which is up now, the country, 56% trust the NHS. But that was the only one over 50%. Right?
Really?
And then you get into the second one down was banking, which is a bit of a shocker, right? Given 2008.
I wouldn't have thought banking would have come second then.
No, I know. No. But actually it does, because you have no choice, right? You've got your money in your bank, or your overdraft in your bank, and you've got to trust them. But then it falls off a cliff, and you get all the way down, and the internet companies, they're all under 10%. So nobody trusts anybody anymore. So you kind of go, the trust in the UK says actually they trust the NHS. If we're going to win the AI race, we are actually number 4 in the world in terms of research papers, China being number 1. So we've got some great researchers. We've got some great researchers in London and Cambridge. It's all very kind of focused in a couple of small areas. But we could take that research and we could apply it into industry. And if we're going to choose industries to do it in, well, where are we strong? We're strong in financial services, and to be fair, they're doing their own thing, and we can see that even with the blockchain stuff. And then health, because we've got a cradle to grave health system. Now we can talk about the quality of data if you like, but so we've got a massive opportunity to become world leaders in health AI, right? Because we've got trust from the public in the NHS and holding data. We've got the cradle to grave health system, which is pretty unique in the whole world, and we've got the AI researchers. So how can we bring that all together to make it, number one in the world? And that's what we should be. We should move the tone of the conversation towards that.
Is that possible with the current public model? Because, arguably this is going to take some private money and more private investment, which is probably one of the very, very hot topics when it comes to healthcare in the UK.
Yeah, so I did a dinner of both public servants and private companies and AI specialists a few weeks ago. We discussed exactly that. And it was quite interesting that some of the people from the NHS were going, we get access to some unbelievable students who have a higher sense of purpose, who want to engage and solve some of the problems. So some of the kind of smaller use cases, they're getting done in creative and imaginative ways. One of the other things which came through was that actually the NHS staff are overburdened with technology, and they're all on different systems, and just creating a whole load of new clever AI systems which go on, you create yet another PC which they don't log off from because they haven't got time, and there's 6 instead of 5, isn't going to help anybody. So there's a kind of a mixture of different things which we need to do to make that happen. Now, private money is definitely going to be coming in, and we need to bring private money, public money, academia in together. But we also need to do the right thing by you and I as the NHS users, and we should be following the trust piece and go, we trust the NHS, but less than 10% of people trust large internet companies. So what we should be doing is breaking that trust by giving the NHS data to large internet companies to go away and do interesting AI research. I think that would be a break of trust. So how do we solve that problem? So we need to tread carefully, but we have an opportunity, and if we engage the public, change the tone of the conversation away from dystopia to utopia, and we can go, actually we want to have an AI leadership in health, and we want it to be not a London Cambridge centric piece. If that's where the research is, that's fine. How do we get it across the rest of the country
so everybody can benefit from this?
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the value exchange for you and I allowing our health records to be, and I think probably when the research of the polling says, if you and I think that our health data is going to be used to improve the operational efficiency or the diagnosis capability of the NHS, we're up for it, right? But we probably won't be up for it if it's going to be private company making tons of money elsewhere and there's no flow back to the NHS.
And I guess that is the topic of today, the monetization of our data. I did one of those 23andMe DNA tests about a year ago, and very recently I noticed a lot of companies who now say, right, they can use your data from your tests to give you other benefits on your diet and lifestyle and whatnot. But exactly as you said, if somebody said to me, right, we can help preventive measures for you, or give you medications that will prevent you from getting diseases you're susceptible to, or improve my health, absolutely, they'd have access to every piece of data on my health I could give them.
But interestingly, there's a great book about genetics which came out about 3 weeks ago called Blueprints, which I think everybody should go and read. And the reason it's interesting is that we've historically, when we've been looking at genetics, we've been looking for one gene which is causing problem X, and there are some illnesses like that, and we can solve those, or in the future we'll solve those by using the CRISPR program. But actually, what they've started doing, because the machine power is there now, is to look over large samples of data across the genes and go, are groups of genes influencing certain health issues? And the book looks very much at mental health, right? And schizophrenia, for example, you can predict up to 85% by just looking at genes, right? But it's not one gene; it's a group of genes.
And added with the environmental factors. Again.
And so you're going to go, but now that goes. If you had to have IVF for whatever reason, you're not a lucky couple, and you had 4 eggs which were feasible. That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Would you do a genetic test to see if one of them would have schizophrenia or not? Because if you did, is that not kind of the superhuman baby coming? But But we would naturally do that, wouldn't we?
I don't think anybody here listening, or very few people, would say absolutely not. I'd rather leave it up to chance if you could do it in a safe way.
Yeah, but so it kind of comes back to the conversation we were having about utopia, dystopia. There are conversations which we need to be having as a community about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Probably what's not acceptable is if you're rich and you decide to adjust loads and loads of different genes so you have a superhuman child, because actually we'll have quickly appear with the superhumans who are going to get all the best jobs and the rest of us will be in trouble, right?
Sounds a little bit like Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, with a short one, unfortunately. But anyway, no, but so that's exactly right. So you kind of go, we don't want that. But actually, if you've got 4 eggs which are viable, that's the right word, then why wouldn't you go, well, if there's one which has a genetic propensity to schizophrenia, why don't we remove that egg? So we need to have those conversations. And we need to have conversations about societal value of work, the Gini coefficient and the UBI, and etc. We need to be having those conversations now.
It's almost like I feel we need a Magna Carta for this future technology, the agreements that all of humanity go by, and we agree the right and the wrong. Coming to that consensus might be impossible. Who knows? Yeah,
and I think that's exactly where I was going, right? Because I think that's exactly what we need. However, I spend more time than I would like in Parliament. That's nothing. If the MPs are listening to this, I should apologise. But obviously they're currently obsessed by Brexit, right? So park that for a second. But they don't feel empowered by the voters to start having these conversations. They are aware these conversations need to be had, but they don't feel the voters, when they go back to their constituencies, are talking to them about the future of work, the use of health data, etc. So as a consequence, MPs don't feel empowered to start changing regulations or having the conversations in a way which is going to lead to a Magna Carta type scenario. So we have a big problem. So that's why I go back to large organisations, like mine or the NHS or the government, needs to be working together and going, here are the benefits, right? But here are the conversations that we need to be having. Move away from the Terminator scenario. We do need to think about how we prevent ourselves going in there, but here are the benefits, and here's the change of tone conversation we need to have.
Thank you very much, Shamus. Great insight, and thank you for joining us for Crypto Unchained.
Great fun, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and please subscribe, share, and tune in for next week's episode.